here I have some vectors of a candelabra. Now, using the turn tool, I'm going to model this candelabra. So I'm firstly going to start by using my vectors that are in blue, and again I've created these vectors and split them in half. If you want to find out more about working with vectors, see one of our other vector creation and editing tutorials. Just selecting this first vector, I'm going to come to the turn tool. To find the turn tool, at the top you'll find two rail sweep. If I hold this button down, the left mouse button this is, under here we'll have extrude, spin and turn. Using the turn tool, I'm going to type in a height of 0.2 and press calculate. Now, if this isn't quite to the height that I require, what I can do is I can just go to undo, so edit, undo relief turn, or I can use Ctrl Z if I require as well. I'm going to type in a height of 0.4 and then recalculate this. So this looks much better. I'm going to come across to this section here. I can leave my turn tool open and press select with that vector. I'm going to type in 0.2 for this piece to make it significantly lower. And again, I'm going to do exactly the same on the opposite side. So the value we had for that was 0.4. Don't forget to press select and calculate. And on this piece here, we had 0.2, select and calculate. So there we have the two side pieces of the candelabra. Now we're going to look at the main stem itself. So again, I've created a vector and I've split it into half. Using the turn tool, I'm going to type in 0.3, making sure it has been selected, and calculate. Again, if we're not quite happy with this, we can Ctrl and Z to undo this, and I'm going to go with 0.5 millimeters, or 0.5 as its scale factor. And there we have the main body of our candelabra. So using the turn tool, we can create some quite nice detail and very what appears to be complex modelling. Now I'm going to finish this off, so I'm going to select this piece here and use the turn tool again, but I'll go to 0.3 this time and calculate. Now what's happened here is it's added. Now if I just undo that and select highest, so this is merge highest, we can see we've got a much nicer finish within this area here, and it overlapped the top nicely within this part. Just so we can see that, I'm going to turn my vectors off. So we can see before it overlapped the top, but now it fits in quite nicely with this egg shaped piece of our candelabra. I'm going to select and create a new layer. My first layer here I'm going to rename to body, and this section here I'm going to rename this to arms, so the candelabra arms. And now I'm going to use the two rail sweep tool. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. First of all, I'm going to select this vector and my cross section, and then I'm going to come up to the top where my turn tool was I was previously using, hold it down and select the two rail sweep tool. And what we'll see here is it's already put in my top drive rail, my bottom drive rail and my cross section. And I'm just going to calculate this. So there we have I just hide my vectors, our arm for our candelabra. I'm just going to turn this mode over to merge high, just so we can see how it fits in more nicely with our design. Now, turning those vectors back on, the other thing I mentioned was a different way of working with the two rail sweep. If I select this vector and say top, select this vector and say bottom. So the previous method of doing this was to select all of our vectors, then open the tool, or we can do one at a time and actually select our cross sections again and calculate. So if I close this down and hide our vectors, we can see we've got the basics of a candelabra created. Now, just to finish this piece off, to add some detail to this, I've created, I just turn my vectors back on, a layer here with my vectors, this joined candelabra, and all it is a vector which is created all the way around the outside and all joined together nicely. The reason for this is I'm going to place a texture over the top of my actual work itself. So I'm creating a new layer which I'm going to rename to texture, and then using the texture tool itself, so to find the texture tool, come up to the top and smooth relief, scale relief, and then between this is our texture tool. Now, the important thing here is to make sure that if you're doing it on a whole layer, a selected vector or a selected colour. In this case, I'm using a selected vector, and I'm going to go from a file. In my texture gallery itself, I'm going to come down and I'm going to use a nice, let's go back up and use the crumpled texture itself. I'm going to make this much smaller, so a width of 10, so that's significantly smaller but a very low height on it. Making sure it is on the selected vector. I have to make sure my vector is selected, importantly, and press add and close. So here we've added a crumpled texture to our candelabra just to add a little bit more detail. So here we can see the finished design of a candelabra which was using the turn tool to create the majority of the main body, finally an two rail sweep tool, and then a quick texture over the top of our design.